Okay, so we can begin mentally. We'll do three bows to the Buddha. One, two, three. And then one time I'll do the verse of homage, the salutation. Namo tassa bhagavato arahat sama sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so we're now continuing to read the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Sevens. And in this class, I hope to run through a number of suttas which deal with a common theme. And most of them are going to be focused on the seven conditions that the Buddha laid down for the flourishing of the bhikkhus, so for the monastics. But the background to this is a discourse that the Buddha gave to a group of citizens of the state of Vesali, or the city of Vesali, the state, the Vajjian state. The ruling community of that state were called the Licchavis. And so the Buddha teaches them what's called seven principles of non-decline, seven sort of guidelines by which the Licchavis or the Vajjis can flourish and not decline. So I'll just go through these quickly. I'm not going to dwell on them and elaborate upon them because I just want to use this as the background for the principles that the Buddha laid down for the bhikkhus, for the monastics. And so the Licchavis, it seems, were the ruling clan within the Vajjian confederacy. It was a confederacy of several small republics. And so he says, as long as the Vajjis assemble often and hold frequent assemblies, only growth is to be expected for them, non-decline. As long as the Vajjis assemble in harmony, adjourn in harmony, and conduct their affairs in harmony, they can expect to grow, not decline. As long as they don't decree anything that has not been decreed or abolish anything that has already been decreed, but undertake and follow the ancient Vajji principles as they have been decreed, only growth is to be expected for them. Okay, as long as the Vajjis honor, respect, esteem, and venerate their elders and think that their advice should be heeded, they can be expected to grow and not decline. Maybe this is quite important. As long as the Vajjis do not abduct women and girls from their families and force them to live with them, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. Number 6, as long as the Vajjis honor, respect, esteem, and venerate their traditional shrines and do not neglect the righteous oblations as given and done to them in the past, only growth is to be expected, not decline. And this is interesting that it shows that the Buddha is still encouraging people to continue to observe sort of the traditional religious observances of their particular community, not to discard them, thinking that now we've become followers of the Buddha, so we just give up our traditional religious rites. And then the 7th, so long as the Vajjis protect righteous protection, shelter, and guard for arahants, with the intention, how can those arahants who have not yet come here come to our realm? And how can those arahants who have already come dwell at ease here? Only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. It's a bit puzzling to me. How will the Vajjis No, who are arhats? I think that probably the sense here is that they're thinking, how can those sort of virtuous monastics who have not yet come here come? Because they're not able, unless they get some word from the Buddha about who's arhat, who's not, they won't be able to tell for themselves. Okay, so then the conclusion comes, as long as these seven principles of non-decline continue among the Vajjis, and the Vajjis are seen established in them, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. And from the context, if you know the broader context, we know that the Buddha laid down these principles for the Vajjis pretty much very close to the end of his life, almost before he undertook his last journey, because this passage also comes in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where King Ajatasattu, the king of Magadha, who had become the king by killing his father, who is a virtuous king, Bimbisara, and King Ajatasattu, he wanted to attack the Vajjis and get control of their realm and absorb it into his own state, the kingdom of Magadha. And so he sent word to the Buddha asking what he could do to conquer the Vajjis, as though the Buddha is going to give the king advice on how to conquer a neighboring territory. But then the Buddha spoke about these seven principles that he had laid down for the Vajjis. Yeah, I won't take questions now. We'll come to questions at the end. Okay, maybe we'll see. What is that question? Somebody, Erin? Yeah, you have to unmute to ask a question. Okay, we'll just have to move on. Okay. Yeah, actually, we get that background story here in the next sutta, which is exactly the same thing, except that here the king is saying that he wants to annihilate the Vajjis, destroy them, bring disaster upon them. And then he sends a messenger to the Buddha to get advice. And then the Buddha tells the king about the seven principles of prosperity or non-decline that he taught to the Vajjis. Okay, so what I want to get to is the next sutta, in which the Buddha is going to teach the seven principles of non-decline for the bhikkhus, for the monks. And even though these principles, of course, are relevant to monastics, but I think it's good also for lay people to be familiar with them. Okay, so this discourse takes place immediately after the Buddha has spoken about the seven principles of non-decline for the Vajjis. And now he applies seven parallel principles to the success of the bhikkhus. And so what are these seven principles of non-decline for the monastics? So as long as the bhikkhus assemble often and hold frequent assemblies, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. And so this becomes a guiding principle for many monastic communities to have a kind of sometimes a weekly Sangha meeting in which all of the monastics will get together and then discuss any issues of concern to them. Sometimes it could be, doesn't have to deal with major issues, sometimes just with work assignments for the upcoming week. If there are any mm, problems that monastics, the resident monks have been facing. Maybe, I don't know, some plumbing needs repair, some defect in the electricity. Those issues could be brought up. And also sometimes there'll be conflicts and disputes arising in amongst the monastics. And so we have to find ways to settle those disputes. And so when the assembly is called, then the head of the assembly, the senior monk, will call the disputing parties to come up and discuss their differences, and then they'll have some discussion on how to resolve those differences. And that leads into the second principle, which almost follows from this. So long as the bhikkhus assemble in harmony, so when they come together and they hold the assembly, they should try to settle any kind of conflicts, differences, disputes within the meeting, within the assembly. And in that way, they'll be able to adjourn in harmony. So when they end the meeting, any kind of hard feelings, resentment that might have arisen in the course of the past week or past few days will now be dispelled, and everybody will be living together and practicing together in harmony. If anybody, one monk has offended against the others, he might be asked to apologize, and then the one who has been offended against will accept the apology and pardon the one who offended him. And in this way, harmony is restored. And in this way, then they are able to conduct the affairs of the Sangha in harmony. So that's the condition for growth, not decline. Yeah, I recall now just in the Anguttara Nikaya book of twos, maybe we could take a quick look at it. There was a very short sutta on the Harmonious assembly and the disputing assembly. That's my phone. Yeah. If you're hearing a little bit of Mozart coming over the microphone, that is the ringtone on my telephone. Okay, it went off. Ah, okay, I could read it. I found it. Yeah, I just will read. It's a very short sutta, so I can just read it out. Okay, so the text says there are these two kinds of assemblies. What are the two? The divided assembly and the harmonious assembly. So what is the divided assembly? Yeah, for those who want the source, this is the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Twos, Sutta number 43. So what is the divided assembly? The assembly in which the monks take to arguing and quarreling and fall into disputes, stabbing each other with piercing words. Literally, it's with the daggers of their tongue. And what is the harmonious assembly? That's the assembly in which the monks dwell harmoniously without disputes, blending like milk and water. So when you pour milk and water, milk into water, the two merge together, viewing each other with eyes of affection. So that is the harmonious assembly. And so we want the assembly here, which the community in which the monks assemble in harmony, end the meeting in harmony, and conduct their affairs in harmony. Okay, the third principle, so long as the monks do not decree anything that has not been decreed, or abolish anything that has been decreed, but undertake and follow the training rules as they have been decreed or laid down, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. And what's interesting about this principle is that if you take it literally, it seems to be laying out like an extremely sort of conservative position in regard to the training rules. But in very, very shortly before the Buddha passed away, when he was giving like his last advice to the Sangha, he said that let the Sangha, if it wishes, abolish the lesser and minor rules of training. And then finally, at the assembly that was held after the Buddha's passing, the monks decided not to abolish any of the training rules. But it seems that from that statement that the Buddha had somewhat of a flexible attitude towards the lesser and minor rules of training. But here he seems to be laying down an extremely strict conservative position, not to abolish anything or to decree anything not decreed. So it will be a bit of require some hermeneutics, principles of interpretation. How do you reconcile those apparently conflicting statements? Okay, number 4.
Excuse me, Bhante.
Please hold questions till I finish going through.
Is your microphone in the right place? The voice is kind of low.
Oh. How is my sound now?
We can hear you, Bhante, but it was muddled just a little bit earlier, but it's okay now.
Okay, now it's okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now is it better?
Yes, Bhante. Yeah, it's fine.
Yes, this.
Okay. Okay, so what I was saying, did you hear where I called attention to what seems to be a contradiction between two statements of the Buddha?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we heard that, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, so now we come to principle number 4. So as long as the monks honor, respect, esteem, and venerate those monks who are elders of long standing, long gone forth, fathers and guides of the Sangha, and think they should be heeded or followed, and growth is to be expected, not decline. Yeah, so this statement, we could see it puts a certain emphasis on having respect for the elders in the order. But also, we need a little qualification here. Here we have to consider those monks who are elders who are also considered to be at least of upright virtue, of good conduct, having some degree of learning, knowledge, understanding of the Dhamma, and dedication to the proper practice of the Dhamma. There are other suttas, I think some verses in the Dhammapada, just because as a monk is an elder in terms of his seniority, don't think that he should be necessarily sort of followed, esteemed, and respected, because there can be monks who are 40, 50 years in the order, and yet their conduct is blemished and they don't have any kind of dedication to the practice. So here, of course, the Buddha is speaking during the period of his own life where there will be, the next generation of monks will include many who are arhats, non-returners, and so forth. And certainly many who are of good conduct, learned, expounders of the Dhamma, whose advice should be followed. Okay, then we come to principle number 5. So here we come to a more inward quality. As long as the monks do not come under the control of arisen craving, the craving that leads to renewed existence, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. And I think, of course, is everybody who is not yet an arahant will have some degree of craving, of tanha. But I think what is mentioned here in relation to the communal harmony of the Sangha and the flourishing of the Sangha would be, and this is my speculation, would be monks having craving for maybe fine, lavish requisites, having exorbitant living quarters, luxurious monasteries, delicious food, abundant and delicious food, a lot of luxurious items, and then especially probably maybe the most dangerous type of craving would be the craving for what is called gain, honor, and fame. So when monks get under the control of that kind of craving, then they start pursuing their own individual, egotistical interests and break up the harmony in the community. And that breaks up the community and the harmony. Okay, then 6, as long as the monks are intent on forest lodgings, only growth is to be expected, not decline. Yeah, so this sort of renews the emphasis that the Buddha often makes on for the monks to dwell in the forest. Of course, the Buddha himself, his major monasteries were not in the forest, but they were on the outskirts of the major cities. So we have the bamboo grove just outside the capital city of Magadha, the city of Rajagaha, and Anathapindika's monastery, the Jeta's Grove in Savatthi, or outside the city of Savatthi. But the Buddha would encourage the monks often to resort to the forest and dwell in the forest, where it's quiet, where one is not disturbed by crowds of people, and when one has suitable facilities for meditation practice. But then there are other suttas which come to mind in which the Buddha says, it doesn't matter whether one is dwelling in the forest or in a town or city monastery, if one is virtuous, diligent, ardent, dedicated to the practice, then one is worthy of praise. And if a monk is living in the forest, but he is living there negligently, then he is open to criticism, to blame. And then the 7th principle, as long as the monks establish mindfulness within themselves with the intention, how can well-behaved fellow monks who have not yet come here come? And how can well-behaved fellow monks who are already here dwell at ease? Then growth is to be expected for them, not decline. Yeah, I'm laughing because I find it interesting that the same principle with regard to the Vajjis, who are lay people, who are members of the the Vajjian aristocrat, the Licchavis, they are thinking, how can the arahats come here and dwell at ease? And so the Vajjians are able to know who are the arahats, but the monks simply and humbly think, how can well-behaved fellow monks come here? They're not thinking of who are arhats, who are not, but just how can our fellow monks, well-behaved fellow monks, come here? Okay, and then the Buddha sort of summarizes and says, as long as these 7 principles continue among the monks and the monks are established in them, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. Maybe are there any questions that come up in relation to, or comments in relation to this sutta? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll just go on. And so now the Buddha picks up on this idea of laying down 7 principles of non-decline, and he goes on to lay down another set of principles of non-decline. I think it will come to 4 sets of 7 principles of non-decline. Okay, so here he says, as long as the monks do not delight in work, do not take delight in work, are not devoted to delight in work, only growth is to be expected for them. So what is meant by work here? Primarily, what it means is construction work, because in the time of the Buddha, often the monks would work together to construct the buildings of the monastery. And of course, to have a functioning monastery, you need buildings. And I guess sometimes the monks would call in professional carpenters from the town or city to do the work. But in putting up smaller buildings like cottages or residents, they would do this construction work themselves. And in fact, in Thailand, even today, in the forest monasteries, the monks construct the kutis, the meditation huts for themselves. And they've become, many of them have become very, very skilled, almost at the same level as professional carpenters. And so it's necessary to do this work in order to have huts and cottages for the monks to live. But when they become, maybe there's a tendency to become too attached to that kind of work and then become obsessed to it to the point where all one could think about is the next construction project. And then one just lays down one's practice and devotes oneself fully to the work of construction. So somebody says, what is your practice? Instead of saying, I do mindfulness of breathing, I do contemplation of the feelings, I do metta meditation. But for them, what is your practice? Construction, building, putting up buildings. Okay. Yeah, another thing, another kind of work project that they do is if you see the alms bowl of the monk, and then there's a kind of, well, it's like a little stand for the alms bowl. So when you put the alms bowl down on a table, then first the stand is placed on the table, and then you put the alms bowl on top of the stand, and the stands are made out of, often they're made out of spliced pieces of bamboo, which are woven together into a very intricate pattern. And those are done, constructed, made by the monks. And the stands that come from Thailand, the ones that we used to use in Sri Lanka were very, very plain, very ordinary. I think they were like metal, just in the shape of a stand. And then there would be the support, and then a piece that goes against the table to hold up the bowl. But the ones in Thailand are made of the spliced pieces of bamboo in these very intricate patterns. And so these are made by monks who become very, very skilled, so that even the monk's specialization can be constructing bowl stands. And maybe they compete with each other to see who could make the most complex, most intricate, most beautiful bowl stands. Okay, so one thing to be avoided is to avoid delight in work. At the monastery, one always has to do some work. Yeah, another kind of work that is done is sweeping the grounds. And this is done. I remember somebody said to me a few days ago, thinking, oh, the Theravada monks don't do any work at the monastery. That's just done by the monks. But I told her, no, not so. At the Theravada monasteries where I did, every day the monks sweep the grounds, but that can become a bit of an obsession to get the grounds so perfectly, immaculately spotless that they don't even see a single dried leaf on the ground. Yeah, and then there's like intricate broom patterns that one places on the sand after one has swept away the leaves. You've seen it in Sri Lanka? Yeah, Venerable Changre has seen this in Sri Lanka. The way, because they use a special kind of broom, it's called Italy, is that what it's called? The broom which is made out of the stiff,
Yes, Bhante.
yeah, the stiff slabs of, is it coconut?
It's called eagle, Bhante.
Or maybe it's a kind of dried leaf, stiff leaf. Yeah,
It
anyway,
is coconut, Bhante.
what is it?
It is coconut.
It's coconut, okay. Yeah.
It's called
So,
eagle, Bhante. Eagle. Eagle broom. E-K-E-L.
akel,
Yeah.
akel. The one with the stiff
Stem in
leaves.
the stem in the center of the leaf. Coconut leaf.
I thought it was called idli. Idli. Anyway, it
It
doesn't.
is idala, Bhante, in Sinhala. Idala.
Idala.
In
Yeah.
Sinhala, it's Idala. You're right.
Idala.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, after they remove all of the leaves, then they have a way of inscribing on the stand these very beautiful patterns of concentric circles, which when you come to the monastery after the sweeping, you get this very peaceful feeling. It's very aesthetically uplifting and pleasing. Okay, so there's delight in work, then do not take, as long as the monks do not delight in talk. Of course, some conversation is valuable and necessary, but what is meant is sort of just losing one's mindfulness and getting sort of completely wrapped up in pointless discussions about meaningless things. Then do not take delight in sleep. They're just sleeping long hours and not getting up when it's time for practice. Taking delight in company, and this goes along with delight in talk, since when you get together in a group, then you would start engaging in random chit-chat, and before long you've just been completely immersed in the latest gossip, and your mind is becoming scattered. As long as they do not have evil desires and come under the control of evil desires. Yeah, this is an elaboration of the way I interpreted the craving in the previous sutta. So this would be the desire for, again, luxurious and lavish items, and especially the desire for fame, honor, praise, and positions of authority. wishing to take on important positions in the monastery. Then the sixth, as long as they don't associate with bad friends, so we could understand the importance of this item. And seven, as long as they don't come to a stop midway on account of some minor achievement of distinction, only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. And I think the commentary explains a minor achievement of distinction as coming to a stop at some attainment, such as purifying one's behavior, jhana, insight, stream entry, and so on. Even achieving the state of non-returner can be considered a trifling achievement of extinction, since the final goal will be the attainment of arhatship. And so the Buddha is saying, as long as one hasn't attained arhatship, you shouldn't stop midway. Okay, so this is sutta number 2. Okay, I think we can go through all of them, then I'll take the questions. So now we come to sutta number 3, in which we find another set of 7 principles of non-decline. And these will be what are called the 7 saddhamma, the 7 good qualities. So these are faith, the sense of moral shame, that's hiri, the sense of moral dread, ottappa, learning, then virya, energy, sati, mindfulness, and panya, wisdom. So as long as the monks are endowed with these 7 good qualities, then only growth is to be expected for them, not decline. And then the next sutta, we have another 7 principles of non-decline, and this is the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment. I'm not going to give an elaboration on these 7 factors here, but we just run through their enumeration. So we have the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, the enlightenment factor of investigation of phenomena, the factor of energy, factor of piti, rapture or joy, the factor of tranquility, samadhi, concentration, and upekkha, equanimity. Okay, then we have still another set of 7 principles of non-decline. And these are come to be called the 7 contemplations, or the 7 perceptions. And these will be supplemented by 3 more to form a set of 10 perceptions in the Girimananda Sutta. So this is again, I'm not going to elaborate on these. Well, to some extent I will. So we have the perception of impermanence, the perception of non-self, okay, then we have the perception of unattractiveness, and this is in Pali, this is the asubha sanya, and this is the perception of the inherently unattractive or non-beautiful nature of the body, expounded by contemplating the body in terms of the 32 constituents: hairs of the head, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, and so on through the different tissues, organs, and fluids. Okay, then comes the perception of danger, and this is elaborated in the Girimananda Sutta as contemplating the body as subject to many different kinds of illnesses. And so the Girimananda Sutta gives a list, I don't know the count, maybe about 20 or 30 different kinds of illnesses to which the body is subject. And we could expand on that list with many types of illnesses which have been newly recognized. And one contemplates that this body, my own body, even when I'm healthy, I'm subject to all of those, potentially subject to those illnesses. Okay, the perception of abandoning, which is not really a perception as such, but it is the effort to abandon whatever kind of unwholesome thoughts arise. The sutta mentions thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of harming. And then it says what any other kind of unwholesome thoughts, when those thoughts arise, one doesn't accept them and tolerate them, but one applies one's energy to abandon them, remove them, eradicate them, and ensure that they don't arise again in the future. So that's the perception of abandoning. Then comes the perception of dispassion and perception of cessation. These are defined in the Girimananda Sutta almost by the same formula, just a little difference. So basically, these two, we could call them as reflective contemplations on the qualities of Nibbana. So we'll say this is sublime, this is the peaceful, this is sublime, that is the stilling of all conditioned activities, the relinquishment of all points of attachment, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. So the two are almost the same. So those are the 7 contemplations or 7 perceptions. And as long as the monks develop those 7 perceptions, then that is 7 principles of non-decline. And then we have here 7 things that lead to the decline of the lay follower. Okay, so these are important to pay attention to, these 7 things. So what are the 7? First, one stops seeing bhikkhus, and we could broaden this and say bhikkhus or bhikkhunis. In other words, that one doesn't go take the opportunity when they're present to go to visit monastics, or when they're giving a program, a dharma talk, conducting any kind of religious activity, going to see them. And it's said some places that even the sight of virtuous monastics is beneficial. It has a kind of soothing effect on the mind, uplifting effect on the mind, just by seeing, especially for faithful and devoted Buddhist lay practitioners, seeing good monastics wearing the ochre robes, just the sight of the robe gives some kind of calm and upliftment and inspiration to the mind. And so one is encouraged to go to see them, to visit temples or monasteries, to see them. The second thing that leads to decline is that one neglects listening to the good Dhamma. And so one should not only go to see monastics, but one should go to see them when they're giving Dhamma talks. And so one should, or even if there's a lay practitioner who's knowledgeable about the Dhamma giving a Dhamma talk, one should go to listen to the good Dhamma. And the Buddha lays down in other suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Book of Fives, the proper way to listen to the Dhamma. For example, when you listen, you don't just listen casually, but you should listen attentively. Nowadays, we would say that when listening, good to take notes. But even if one isn't taking notes, but one is paying close attention. Otherwise, the Buddha says it's like a person who has a bucket for collecting water, but the bucket doesn't have a bottom, or the bottom has a lot of holes. So you turn on the faucet and the water comes into the bucket, but as soon as the water gets into the bucket, it flows right out. So that is like listening to the Dhamma with a distracted mind. Sometimes I don't see it here, but I think that there are places where people are listening to Dhamma talk. Well, actually, I've seen it on other places where I've given Dhamma talks, and I see the phone is out and the thumbs are scrolling through the phone. Yeah, so you should listen attentively, trying to retain what one has learned. And when one listens, one has to listen with an open, receptive mind, not seeking faults in the speaker or faults in the talk, which doesn't mean that one abandons your critical capacity, your critical faculties. You also have to be listening critically to try to find if there are faults in the talk and you perceive the faults, you recognize them as such, but you don't go with the fault-finding mind, just intent on finding weaknesses in the talk. Actually, we have that here, number 5 already. It seems number 5 really should come after number 2. So he listens to the Dhamma with a mind bent on criticism, seeking to find faults with it. Yeah, you can listen with keeping your critical faculties alert, but not just with the intention of finding faults. Okay, then he does not train in the higher virtuous behavior. So this would be diligently observing the 5 precepts. And on occasion, especially on the Uposatha days, the Poya days, even going on to observe the 8 precepts. Then he is full of suspicion towards the monks, if you say monks and nuns, whether elders, newcomers, or of middle standing. Of course, sometimes one has to be a little suspicious because sometimes behavior of monks is not always up to the mark. And so if you see signs of that make you suspicious, don't immediately dismiss them. But this is, I think, the kind of attitude of somebody who's always looking to find fault with the monks and sometimes can build up, big criticisms and start spreading slander just on the basis of slight little types of misdemeanors on the part of the monks. I already did number 5. Then 6 and 7 go together. So this is seeking a person worthy of offerings among outsiders. And what this means, this seems a little bit maybe narrow-minded. By outsiders are meant ascetics and Brahmins outside the Buddhist fold. So in the Buddha's time, these would be the Jain ascetics, the Ajivika ascetics, the ascetics of the various other communities. So first you seek somebody worthy of offerings amongst those outsiders, and then you first do meritorious deeds in relation to them, and then afterwards you do so to the Buddhist monastics. Yeah, so this needs a little explanation. It doesn't mean the Buddha is not saying that a Buddhist lay follower shouldn't make offerings to non-Buddhist monastics, priests, clergy who depend on the alms of others, but he actually encourages, in some of the suttas, he encourages his lay followers to make offerings to the ascetics of no matter what community they might belong to. But the idea here is that one is seeking a noble one, that is one who has reached some stage of enlightenment or realization among the non-Buddhist ascetics, and then one makes the offerings to them first before one does so to the monastics of the Buddhist community. And so he says those 7 things lead to the decline of a lay follower, and then the 7 things that lead to non-decline or growth is one continues to see monks, one goes regularly to listen to the good Dhamma, one trains in the higher virtuous conduct, one has confidence in the monks, one listens to the Dhamma with a mind not bent on criticism, and then 6, one doesn't seek a person worthy of offerings among the outsiders, nor does one do meritorious deeds there first. Okay, so maybe now we can see whether we have any questions. And let me get Okay, so if you have questions, then the way to pose the question is you find that symbol for the raise hand, and then you click it. Okay, so I keep on seeing Vandana's hand come up and down. Okay, now it's up steady. Okay.
Sorry, Bhante, I don't know what I was doing. Yeah, so I really like this information which I just got. I wanted to ask you, if we see something, we respect monastic a lot, but sometimes we are confused why they're doing something. For example, driving or having a bank account on their names, something like that. So is it okay to ask them politely to clarify, or it's going to be disrespectful?
No, I think you can ask them politely.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, good. I have to tell the people online, I have this habit of continually just looking at the participant list on the computer screen and not looking out at the people who are here in the hall for their questions. Finally, I just saw a hand come up here. So please.
How do you think the Buddha took this time in his life to define these 7?
Okay, he's asking, why did the Buddha use this time in his life to? Yeah, probably because, of course, we don't know whether he might have also been speaking about these, certainly a lot of these things that we see laid down for the monks, we also see in suttas given during the course of his life. But maybe now, because he knows he's going to pass away, and so his leadership will not be there anymore. And so he wants to ensure that the monks are going to flourish in his absence after he's gone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he could have been teaching these 7 principles in different forms earlier to the monks, but now he's bringing them all together shortly before his passing so that they'll serve as guidelines for the community.
Just a quick question. What is the Pali word for stream enterer again?
Oh, he's just asking, what is the Pali word for stream enterer? Yeah, stream entry is sotapatti, and then the one who has attained it is called sotapanna.
Ikya Buddha is something else.
No, the Pacceka Buddha is somebody who, at a time when the Buddha's teaching is not available, attains enlightenment on his own, but doesn't establish, we call the sasana, doesn't establish the teaching in the world. Okay, any question here? Okay, so then we'll go back online. So we have Gita?
Yes, Bhante. This is a huge, like, sort of an issue in Sri Lanka. There's like lay people shouldn't be getting involved with misbehaving monastics, right? Because like if the order will do that themselves, because don't they have a set of governing principles within each organization where they look up to a senior monastic and then they would bring it up? Because lay people put a lot of criticism, um, judgments about the monastics. Like, for example, they post YouTube videos where a monk is in robes and he's drinking liquor and trying to drive a car. Like, I don't know, for me personally, and then one of the Bhantes came online and said, please don't be judgmental on our monastics. We have a monastic code, and if somebody misbehaves within our organization, we will make sure that, we bring it up in our council, in our meetings. So, I mean, isn't there kind of a karma that might form if we lay people get involved? Like when Buddha was there, he was there to, there were 5 mischievous monks, and he was there to restrain or teach them and tell them, you foolish man. But now, it's just so muddled, and there's just so many, and because of it, I think the monastics are getting like a bad rap. It's not fair. So, I mean, it should be done within the monastic organization. I'm not sure, Bhante. I mean, do we step in and get involved in any way? Like, because we live a lay life, right? So
Well,
how do you feel, Bhante?
okay, this is my opinion.
Okay, Bhante.
Okay, if lay people see monks misbehaving, they can, and if they have like a personal connection to that monk, they can speak directly to that monk. If they see monks as a group misbehaving, then they can go to speak to, could be like the head of the monastery,
Correct.
that particular Nikaya, that particular community of monastery, a group of monasteries. Yeah, so I would say that is part of the responsibility of the lay people, is to serve as, to provide a criticism of the monks, not doing so with a angry, harsh mind, but trying to ensure that the monks are directed onto the right path. And there's a basis for this. We see in the Vinaya, I mean, most of the minor training rules were laid down when monks were behaving in ways that didn't quite accord with the standards that lay people
Correct.
expect of a monk. And so the way that the Vinaya puts it, that people started to complain. They use a series of words, how to translate them. Basically, you could sum them up as they were mumbling, grumbling, complaining, and spreading it around. How can the monks do such and such? And then the people come to the bhikkhu,
Buddha.
the good behaved, the well-behaved bhikkhus, complain about the misbehaving monks, and then the good monks then come to the Buddha and say, the people are saying that such and such monks are behaving in such and such a way. Then the Buddha will say, he'll call the assembly together and then say, now I lay down this rule. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, thanks, Bhante. Yeah, I was aware of that.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you, Bhante.
but it's quite another thing if you said that some lay people are posting like videos online,
Yeah, it's
of them
crazy.
drinking alcohol.
Yeah, it was so sad. Like, breaks your heart to see it. But then,
Yeah,
I don't know,
that
Bhante.
they
Yeah.
shouldn't do, but they should go,
Yeah.
They're the head of a local monastery and then register the complaint with him.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, next will be Rina.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. So I had a question about looking at everything as anicca, anatta, and dukkha.
Wait, I'm not getting this down clearly. Say again.
I had a question about looking at everything as anicca, anatta, and dukkha.
Yeah.
So does that mean you're not supposed to look at anything as good or anything with gratitude?
That you're not supposed to.
Look at anything as good and anything with gratitude.
Oh, no, that doesn't mean that at all. But I think I didn't really want to get into the details of these contemplations now. Perhaps we'll come across them. In fact, last week we dealt with, I think last week I dealt with the three contemplations of anicca, dukkha, anatta. Were you here last week?
Yeah, I asked, there was 40 descriptions, akinchito, atvantato, like 40 negative views of all phenomena, all sankharas. So I wanted to know, are you supposed to look at anything as good, anything with gratitude?
No, certainly one is supposed to have gratitude. The Buddha praises gratitude. And there are many, many things you can look at as good. But to explain dukkha would really require almost a lecture in itself.
Which sutta talks about gratitude?
It's mentioned in little suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya. It's mentioned and I don't know the numbers offhand. I think it's someplace in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Threes, and it's mentioned in the Mangala Sutta just as one of the good qualities. Kanti Chasova Chasata Samana Nancha no Garavocha Nivatocha Santuticha Katanyuta. Yeah. Garavo is reverence, Nivato humility, Santuti contentment, Katanyuta is gratitude.
Yeah, so it was confusing because the primary practice seems to be looking at everything as anicca, anatta, dukkha. So then I was
That is a
confused.
contemplation, but it needs explanation of dukkha, and that's a big topic. Okay, maybe we have time. One more question, if we could find it. So this will be Xiaolan. Xiaolan.
Thank you, Bhante. So previously you said that it's curious that in 23 it says the bhikkhus are only wishing for well-behaved monks to come, and yet for the Licchavis, somehow they are wishing for the arhants to come. And then I'm thinking in terms of 29, where it says about how, if you come to bhikkhus with criticizing mind, then you're bound for decline. I wonder if somehow people understand it to be because lay people don't really know better, and so they should just treat all bhikkhus as if they are arhats.
That's actually a good idea. I didn't think of it from that way, but maybe it's a good idea.
And kind of related to what Gita was asking, and I'm because I've met so many people who are just really treating all bhikkhus as if they are already enlightened. So they absolutely don't criticize bhikkhus at all, right? And then even if they are doing something absolutely egregious, like sexual scandals are found in
Yeah,
all
yeah,
different
yeah,
traditions,
yeah.
right? And then there are still lay people are like, oh, that's not our place. We shouldn't ever criticize bhikkhu.
No, I think that's the wrong approach.
And so I'm
Especially
wondering, like the
with the
understanding of criticizing bhikkhu in this sutta, this set of suttas.
say again. I just
I'm just wondering about the understanding of
oh,
criticizing bhikkhus in the sutta. Like is there any injunction as in to what extent one is allowed to point out that bhikkhus are misbehaving?
I don't know offhand any sort of standards or guideline in what are the right ways in which you could criticize, what are the wrong ways in which you can criticize. So this is just my own personal opinion that when one sort of observes the behavior of monks with a mind sort of bent on criticism, and then you sort of want to maliciously criticize the monks, not for the sake of really correcting the behavior, but you sort of delight in denigrating and disparaging them. So this is done with a mind of, say, of ill will and animosity. But if the layperson sees monks misbehaving, and then wants to correct them, then with a mind of, say, a mind of kindness and a mind of wishing to uplift those who are departing from the correct path, then you can express the criticism either directly to the monks themselves, if it's suitable to do that, or to their senior, their supervisor. Okay, I think we're going to have to end the class now. And so we will end with the sharing of the merits, sharing the merits with the Dhamma protecting devas, the nagas, and other beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Dukkha pata chani dukkha bhaya pata chani bhaya soka pata chani soka antu sabe pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus.
Satu, satu,
And then we'll
satu.
do 3 bows to the Buddha. Okay, so we could stand up.
Bow to Bhante.
Okay, so thank you all for joining. And let
Had a
me,
bow to our teacher, Bhante Bodhi. Thank you, Bhante.
You so much,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you so
Bhante.
much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Bhante, so
so
much.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Bhante. Good to see you again, Bhante. Good health.
Thank you,
Long
Bhante.
life.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Good to see everyone, please.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
okay,
Bhante.
okay,
Have a great lunch, Bhante. We'll see you on Wednesday.
okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Namaskar, Nama
Bhante.
Buddhaya. Thank you,
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you,
Bye.
Bhante.
Take care, Bhante.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you very much, Bhante.
Everyone, Sarnai.
Good night.
Bhante, thank you very
Okay,
much.
let me stop the recording.
Nine, I'm in right. It's okay. Thank you.